The fog is lifting. Clarity is calling you forward. Welcome to Forward in Freedom. I'm Tanya Johnson. This is where awareness becomes power. Let's move forward in freedom. Every time you agree to something that costs you peace, energy, or integrity, you quietly give someone else authority over a life that was never meant to be managed by them. And today, we're talking about how to stop doing that without apology, without guilt, and without losing your kindness. Welcome to Forward in Freedom, the podcast where people learn how to think clearly inside difficult dynamics and move forward with confidence, composure, and peace of mind. I'm Tanya Johnson, coach, educator, and author. And here we help you recognize unhealthy patterns, reclaim your voice, and respond with clarity and intention. Whether this is your first podcast or one of many, I am genuinely glad that you're here. This space isn't about staying stuck or circling in frustration. It's about learning how to think clearly, speak wisely, and move forward with peace. One theme that I return to often on this show is what I call the journey from fog to freedom. Fog often forms when you keep giving access to your time, your emotions, and your decision making without stopping to ask whether that access is healthy. Freedom begins when you remember this is my life. My energy is not public property. I get to decide what comes in and what stays out. Together, we cut through the fog. And today's episode is called From Fog to Freedom, Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. And I want to go deeper than surface level encouragement into the kind of clarity that actually changes how you live. Because many people know that they should set boundaries. What they don't know is why it feels so terrifying, why guilt shows up immediately, and why their chest tightens when they even consider saying the word no, and why they talk themselves out of protecting their own life. Let me say this clearly. When you leave your life unguarded, others will naturally begin making decisions that were never theirs to make. Not always maliciously, sometimes through expectation, sometimes through pressure, sometimes through emotional dependency, sometimes through subtle control. And if you don't decide who and what gets access to you, decisions will be made for you. I learned this personally. There came a point in my life when I realized if I didn't draw lines, people would continue crossing into places they had no authority to occupy. My calendar, my emotional bandwidth, my mental space, my future. And I had to decide, am I going to live reactive or am I going to become the gatekeeper of my own life? Because that's what boundaries really are. They're not walls, they're gates. And you decide what comes through. I want us to think about, why do boundaries feel so hard? Your nervous system is always involved in boundary decisions. When pressure rises, when expectations stack, when someone pushes past what feels right, your body registers it first. You may notice fatigue before certain conversations, irritation you can't explain, the urge to comply quickly, dread when a certain name pops up on your phone. Those signals matter. They are not overreactions, they are information. The difficulty is that many people were trained to override those signals instead of listening to them. You were praised for being accommodating, for being strong, for being low maintenance, for not making waves. So guilt became automatic whenever you considered protecting yourself. Let's talk about how fog forms around chronic yesing. You see, fog grows when you say yes while resenting it. You cancel your own self to keep others comfortable. You take responsibility for other people's emotions. You shrink your needs so someone else won't get upset. Guilt is one of the most powerful fog producers there is. And over time, it quietly erodes the very boundaries meant to protect you. Not because you don't have them, but because you stopped honoring them. Here's something important: when you don't guard your life, someone else will attempt to manage it for you. That is out of order. This is your life. You are the gatekeeper. You decide who and what has access. That realization alone moves people several steps closer to freedom. Boundaries are not about controlling others, they're about governing ourselves. Let's create a little space for reflection right here. Where in your life do you feel pressure to stay accessible? Who benefits when you don't protect your time? What boundary have you delayed because you didn't want to seem difficult? Now we're going to put two experiences next to each other, and I want you to notice the difference. Reaction is quick and pressured. It sounds like, sure, I guess that's fine. I'll just handle it. It's not worth arguing. Forget it. Never mind. You leave the interaction unsettled, replaying, irritated, depleted. Response is anchored, and it sounds like, let me think about that. That doesn't work for me right now. I'm not comfortable with that. I need to revisit this later. Response is not louder, it's clearer. It comes from self respect instead of survival. Reaction tries to end discomfort, response protects your future. And the moment you stop reacting and start responding, you reclaim ownership of your life. That's why every episode here includes what I call a freedom nugget, a story, a reframing thought, or a practice that you can begin using immediately. Your freedom nugget today is this: you are not responsible for managing other people's reactions to your healthy boundaries. You are responsible for your choices. You are not responsible for their disappointment. This distinction will change your life. I would like to share one sentence that you can rehearse this week. I've decided to do something different. Not explain, not justify, not soften. Just, I've decided to do something different. Notice how that feels in your body. That is authority. That is clarity. That is freedom beginning. Before we close, let's bring this all the way down into your everyday life. Picture one decision that's coming up this week. Where might you try? Where might guilt try to steer the wheel? What boundary would honor your health? What version of yourself do you want to be proud of later? In this episode, we did something very important. We exposed how guilt keeps people trapped. We reframed boundaries as a form of leadership over your own life. We replaced automatic yeses with intentional choices. And we reminded you, you are allowed to protect what God entrusted to you: your time, your mind, your future. Next week, we're talking about the quiet agreements people make with pressure, the intentional rules that say keep the peace, don't disappoint, don't rock the boat. We'll unpack where those rules come from and how to rewrite them without losing your kindness or your faith. If this podcast is sharpening your clarity week after week, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up. Every subscription helps this message reach someone who is still stuck in confusion. And if someone you care about struggles with boundaries, share this episode with them. It may be the nudge toward clarity they've been needing. And if this conversation is stirring something in you, maybe naming places where you've been carrying too much, you don't have to walk that alone. You will hear me reference my book, A Woman's Exodus Only by Grace, my work with Clear Direction Coaching, and the My Seven Figure podcast. Each exists to support people who want to live with clarity, strength, and purpose, personally and professionally. This is Tanya J, and this is Forward in Freedom, where we go from fog to freedom. Until next time, walk forward with intention.